Good afternoon, everyone. In case you thought that it's Obama coming down to speak here, they switched the program, so if you need to leave. And so it's Friday the 13th, which already means we're going to have a lucky day, and I'm the luckier guy who actually got to speak immediately after lunch. So I hope. Did anybody have coffee? People have coffee? I still have some chocolate left in case. So I'm from Berkeley, and if there's one thing I want you to remember from this Friday the 13th after lunch, professor from Berkeley with a funny accent and a bad hair day, the one thing I want you to remember is this line. The line goes, learning is moving in new ways. So it's just one idea, all right? But actually I've already lied. We've just met, I've already lied to you. It's two ideas. Learning is moving in new ways. It's two ideas. One of them is that learning, the process of learning, is in physically, sensory motoric engaging in interactions with problems, in problem spaces. We learn through the body. Concepts, even mathematical concepts, emerge through reflection on our sensory motor interaction in the world. And what I'm going to try and persuade you here is that even when we're standing or sitting or closing our eyes, like, Rodin's Le Penseur sort of guy, still it is our projected body that is moving and acting, only that you don't see it from the outside. But if you do the brain imagery, you'll see all that action is going on there. And actually, we only have one kind of brain, which, respecting everyone's religious beliefs, it's a long time that it took to become the brain that it is now. I don't know where people will be watching this on YouTube someday. So I need to, and just as our body evolved in certain ways, so did the brain. But higher order thoughts like mathematics, like literature, like philosophy, like engineering, like computer science, they co-opted the sensory motoric sense and capacities that we have in order to engage in the world. It never suddenly, poof, became a different kind of brain. We are still thinking through moving, even when you don't see us moving. So that's one interpretation of the phrase, learning is moving in new ways. The learning occurs through learning to move in new ways and reflecting on them. But then there's the other meaning of learning is moving in new ways, and that is about the word learning. The definition of the word learning, the scholarship and research around this phenomenon of learning is moving in new ways. Historically, we are at a very exciting time now. There's a paradigm change, a paradigm shift that we are living even as we speak. As we switch from the 20th century conceptualizations of the brain as this kind of, like a computer, you have input of all your senses, right? And then something churns away, and then there's output of your motoric system. Well, yeah, if you wanted to build a robot, you'd probably do that. But in terms of the actual phenomenology, the actual way that we engage in the world, the actual way we think, it's really irreducible. So we are moving from this, what's called GoFi, good old-fashioned artificial intelligence, GoFi. That kind of thinking of the brain as a computer with a CPU, we're moving into a different kind of way of thinking. But then there's huge questions around it. So what are concepts? How are concepts related to the body's movement? And what does it mean to understand, to learn, to remember, to respond, to engage in logical reasoning and so on? How are these things related? So those are the kind of questions that fascinate me, and that in my lab, the Embodied Design Research Laboratory over at Grad School of Education at Berkeley, those are the kind of questions that we pursue. But we pursue them in a very particular way, okay? Some people do research on learning. They do ethnography. They'll come and look at classes as they already are and maybe collect data. Some might do clinical interviews with kids just about the work they're already doing and not trying to teach anything. Other people might do surveys. There are very varied ways of engaging in scientific research on education. The way that we happen to do our work is called design-based research. So one of those things, design-based research, I'm an inventor. I'm kind of one of those lucky guys who likes building gadgets, high-tech, low-tech, for kids to learn stuff and think about it. Lucky guys because there's somebody who's willing to pay me a salary to do this and to teach other people to do that and do it with students. But I'm not just an inventor of systems. We are trying in the lab to develop the principles, the theoretical models and principles that will guide this work of building these artifacts that children will learn through engaging. And we're trying to draw on children's natural capacities, on their intuitions, on their aesthetics, on their perceptual capacities that all of us have just by growing up on this planet. and on their capacity to learn to move in new ways, just as we learn to walk. We're trying to use those kind of skills in order to bring kids to a place where they get it. They really get the math. They know what it means. They know what it's about. I have 2 kids, and the eldest one is 11. She came back yesterday all proud that they had learned a system for dividing one number, a number divided by a fraction. Okay, that one, yeah, that thing. And, the saying goes, for those who don't know, it goes, ours is not to reason why, just invert and multiply. Okay? Anyway, so Naomi comes into the house and says to me, oh, our teacher taught us this great thing. I finally got it. I finally got it. And I'm already going, oh my gosh, where is this going? She says, well, it's based on a story. And I had this glimmer of hope. She says it's a story about King Flip the First and King Flip the Second. I'm going, oh, no. She says, well, you see, because you need to remember to flip the second one. Because the first one is King Flip the First. If he flips, he dies. And then his kid, King Flip the Second, takes over. And King Flip, you get it? You flip, so you remember? So now I get it, she says. Now I understand. And I'm like, whoa, what is all this research about it? So we live in a very rich and elaborate system, the educational system. There are practitioners, students, parents, policymakers, politicians, researchers, and designers, and so on. I'm trying to light my little candle, to voice my little voice of saying, kids need to understand, and it's our responsibility. Everyone's in the system. My responsibility as a researcher and a professor of the subject matter, it's to try and inform the system, both the industry, Silicon Valley, as we build all these amazing apps in which what the candy this or that, or the animals, what they call it when you throw the pigs on the that's it, Angry Birds. I mean, we have all these apps now. All of this stuff is out there. We have all these capabilities to engage children in moving in new ways. I mean, they're learning to move in new ways. And if indeed it is true that our concepts, even mathematical concepts, emerge through first learning to move in a new way and then reflecting on these motions that we've done, what a missed opportunity would be. Now let's flip that into the positive. What an opportunity we have if we could indeed inform all this work of the people building all these millions of apps that you download and they promise you the moon. If we could inform their work so that these apps would really enable children to move in new ways that are informative and helpful for their understanding of the subject content matter. And so I just want to know, how many teachers are there? I already know one teacher from Texas. Okay, great. All right. Wow. All right. So I have huge respect for you guys. I've never actually taught in classrooms, graduate seminars, big deal. I've done some enrichment stuff, but I have huge respect for you guys. And just so that you understand how I position my work and why I see this work as potentially, hopefully, already experimentally contributing to classroom practice, I want to bring some words from a person. Okay, I've already spoken about your religion. Now I'll speak about your politics. No matter what your leanings are, I think these are good words. And I'll read them to you. He said this a few years ago. I sometimes hear it said that great teachers are unsung heroes, and the principalship is a thankless job. But teaching and school leadership are among the few professions that are not just a job or even an adventure. They are a calling. Great teachers and outstanding principals strive to help every student unlock their potential and develop the habits of mind that will serve them for a lifetime. They believe that every student has a gift, even when students doubt themselves. Henry Adams said, a teacher affects eternity. He can never tell where his or her influence stops. That is a weighty responsibility, but also an amazing privilege. All right? Now, of all of these words, the ones that strike me are these. Help every student unlock their potential. What does that mean? What is this potential? And how do we help them unlock it? Okay? So I'm not a teacher, but we try to do this kind of work, ask these questions in our lab. And so, what is the kind of work we do? All right? Borrowed this picture from M.C. Escher. I've always liked it. It means so many different things in so many different contexts. But right here, what I'm talking about is this kind of design-based research, the thing that we do. I think of it as cycles of theory and design. Well, I didn't invent that. They're like 20 or so years ago, Professor Alan Collins, he said, hey, other domains of practice and science, like aeronautics, they have a method. Why shouldn't education have it? In aeronautics, You build an airplane which is only as good as your theory. If you've got all the materials you need and you've done a good job and you're really happy with the product, it came out the way you wanted it to, and then it flies, it doesn't quite fly the way you wanted it to fly, well, the problem is not with the object, because it's an instantiation of your theory. Rather, it means that your theory is incomplete. Okay? So that's the theory and the product, and so you update the theory and maybe you build a better airplane. That's what we're trying to do: build better materials and better activities. But when things don't work, and I mean that's what the research is about, things don't quite come out the way you thought. So you update the theory and hopefully build better models. So this is this iterative, cyclical co-inscribing of theory and design. And you'll see in this meeting today, I'll be speaking both about objects and things we build, but also there'll be some theory around it. All right. So again, and yeah, this is the techie version, and I want to sort of allay any. I don't know if there's anyone. I just want to allay any scruples here. People speak about technology coming to the classroom. What does that mean? Is it going to sort of replace the teacher, or is flip this or that? Well, this gentleman here, his name is Ned Ludd, and he lived in early 19th century in England, and he was very upset during the Industrial Revolution that machines were taking over the job of the weavers. So he organized all these folks who came and broke all these weaving frames to give jobs, and so actually it's become known as Luddism after Mr. Ludd. And there's even neo-Luddism these days. People say, we don't want technology and so on. Well, I'm somewhere in between. I'm trying to make technology that will serve teachers, technology that will enable teachers to make present within their classrooms the kind of concepts and the kind of opportunities for students to engage in a deep and meaningful way that fosters an understanding of the core concepts. Okay? So I'm anti-neo-Luddist. And so back to this guy, all right? If we're already in the early 19th century, this is, I think, from the 18th century. And I told you that through to the 20th century, people still thought, well, the computer is a good model for the brain. And already back then, people thought, and it makes a lot of sense to think, well, how do these things work? People get information from the senses, the taste, the smell, the touch, vision, and sound. And then in the brain, there's all this abstract propositions and stuff that get churned around. And only then we have some kind of instruction to the body to move. All right? And it's very alluring to think so. It's very alluring to separate perception from action because, right, we have the eyes and we have the hands, but actually they co-evolved. They evolved together, one serving the other. We move our head to perceive, and we use our perception in order to guide our action. And ultimately, the actions that we perform, the action routine, the operatory schemes, are interleaved perception and action in ways that are irreducible. Right? And so we're going to be spending some time on this slide, and this will be the last sort of theory-heavy slide. But I hope it's fun stuff. I want to start by reading something by Varela and Thompson and Roche, Francisco Varela, Evan Thompson, and Eleanor Roche from 1991. It's their seminal book on embodied cognition. And they have this phrase, an act of embodied cognition, and they write it so well, I couldn't do better. So I'm just going to read a paragraph here. They say, let us explain what we mean by this phrase, embodied action. By using the term embodied, we mean to highlight 2 points. First, that cognition depends upon the kinds of experience that come from having a body with various sensory motor capacities. And second, that these individual sensory motor capacities are themselves embedded in a more encompassing biological, psychological, and cultural context. By using the term action, we mean to emphasize once again that sensory and motor processes, perception and action, are fundamentally inseparable in lived cognition. Indeed, the two are not merely contingently linked in individuals, they have also evolved together. In a nutshell, and here's 2 more sentences, and they're kind of difficult. I'm still thinking about them. The enactive approach consists of 2 points. 1, perception consists in perceptually guided action. Okay, so that's the idea of irreducibility of perception action. But here's the hard nut, all right? Cognitive structures, what you might call, the stuff that concepts are made from, cognitive structures emerge from the recurrent sensory motor patterns that enable action to be perceptually guided. Okay, I'll read that just one more time. Our cognitive structures emerge from the recurrent sensory motor patterns that enable action to be perceptually guided. So I'll be coming to that later when I show you some of the stuff we're working on. But basically the point is, through routines of sensory motor engagement in our everyday practices and solving of problems, we come to see the world in new ways. And we come to see the new ways because that is felicitous for our productive engagement in solving every problems that we do, from tying your laces to making a sandwich to what have you. But it's certain ways that our perception begins to guide our action. And when we can reflect on and articulate those routines of perceptually guiding the actions, that is where the concept comes from. And for anyone who's read Vygotsky or Piaget, this should make a lot of sense. This is not new in and of itself, but it's a new kind of way of thinking for the cognitive sciences. So, all right, I'm told never put the audience on the spot, but I'll give you 5 seconds to solve this. And the point is, the point is that I'm taking this leap of faith, salta mortalis, like because you'd say, all right, very, very well, Professor, this is all about the body and tying laces, but what about math? You know, the crown jewel of those, all those superlatives. What has this got to do with the body? Well, I'm inviting you to start to think about even mathematical work as somehow related to simple things like counting with your fingers. Oh my gosh, should we let kids count with their fingers? You know, these big issues. And what if I gave you this? So, okay, you might call these abstract. Now, I don't use the word abstract at all. It doesn't help me. But you might call, these are symbolic notations. But what if I gave you that? And, okay, I can imagine that at least a few people here have played with that thing, but I don't know how skilled you are. But maybe if I gave you that, you could solve this problem in 5 seconds. But already you can see what I mean, that mathematics, the moment it's about objects in the world that we manipulate iteratively according to some kind of production rules and keep looking at the feedback and acting upon that according to our rules, you already see that, well, okay, the brain is inside, the tissue, the organ is in the head, but where's the mind? Where is the mind? You could say it's just a semantic question. We can decide what we mean by the word mind. But actually, there's huge repercussions for this question. Where is the mind? And the tendency over the past few decades is to say the mind is not just in there. It's in the actions that we do, and it's distributed over the artifacts that we engage and we turn into instruments so that we learn how to use them. And it's distributed over time, and it's distributed over other people who all engage in a common practice. So the mind is extended. Okay, still, but you guys still haven't solved this. Let's see if so the mind is extended, and we can start beginning to incorporate actions as our way of thinking, all right, and incorporating artifacts. Now this in and of itself, well, okay, so people have some kind of basic recognition of this. But, you know, it's an artifact, and you kind of know what it's for, but you don't necessarily know how to use it, okay? But in order to use it effectively, all right, and here there's 2 funny words that are used in research, in order to instrumentalize it, meaning to make it into an instrument that has an effect on the world, you yourself need to become instrumented. What I mean by that is, you yourself need to figure out how to work with this thing so that it mediates your effect on the world, right? Whether you're using a fork, whether you're using a telescope, whether you're using a pen, there's some kind of artifact, which is the cultural historical heritage of civilization, that is put in your hands, say, and mediates your effect on the world. But in order to use a fork right, anyone who has kids, right, in order to tie a shoelace, in order to make that happen, that procedure happen, you yourself need to figure stuff out. And it's in the figuring out of how to use a certain artifact as an instrument to have an effect in the world. It's in that busy work, in that learning, that we start to understand concepts. And so let's look actually at this case here of some kids who have been working a lot with the abacus. Okay? They've been working a great deal to the extent that they no longer need the abacus in their hands. Isn't that weird? Just watch this and we'll talk more about it.
Along with the other high flyers, He can now do huge calculations with a purely imaginary abacus, manipulating nothing but thin air.
Okay. What, that 4 or 5 seconds? So where's the mind? Right? I said the brain is that thing in the head, but where? This starts sort of to blur our convenient, sort of, let's call that Al Gore book, The Inconvenient Truth. It starts blurring the sense of what's inside and outside, because he's kind of doing it in his head, but he's doing it in his hand. He's working with an abacus, but the abacus isn't there. So what's going on? Now, of course, it's very nice to use this in a talk such as this, because it strikes home. It's so extreme. But my argument here, well, hardly mine, but I'm arguing here that what you see here exemplifies a phenomenon that is universal, and pervasive, and mundane. This is what Lev Vygotsky called the interiorization of cultural forms, to the extent, in this case, extreme extent, where they're literally simulating their work in the external world by not only doing the actions, but even anticipating the feedback. It's almost like I move the beads up there, I know how it looks, so now I do that, so now I know. They do it iteratively. They are simulating in their minds their external physical work with artifacts outside of their brains, okay? So all of this to say, I'm kind of pushing you guys. I want you to push these distinctions which are so convenient, to say in and out, and perception and action, and concrete, abstract. Is this concrete or abstract? Right? These words, I used to use these words, concrete, abstract, but then one of my senior colleagues at Berkeley, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, he has this nice phrase. He says, these words, they don't do work for me. He says, abstract, what do we even mean? And another of my mentors, Professor Uri Walensky, he says, these words, concrete and abstract, well, sure, we all use them. We all use them colloquially. But when you come to think about it, they're not really properties of objects. They're really subjective. Because for this kid, what he's doing now, that's completely concrete. He's doing all the stuff, right? But for us, it's like, whoa, what's going on? This is crazy abstract stuff. So these words, concrete and abstract, they're about a subjective relationship with ideas and the ideas that emerge from the interactions. So thinking is as simulating. And there's work by Hatano and Inagaki on expert abacus, like the supreme experts, when this kid grows up sort of thing. They get to the point where they no longer even need to use fidget their fingers as they're working. So much so that if you give them kind of a masking, tell them, I don't know, clap your hands, those sort of things supposed to distract them, they can do it even without moving their hands. Even doing the distracting work, they can still give you the answers. It's these neural circuitries have got to such a myelination that they no longer actually need to move their hands. And so it's as if, and this is something that Vygotsky said almost 100 years ago, if you think of action as, look, I'm thinking and now I actually moved, when you're just reasoning, you're thinking, but it's like it truncated action at the moment where it was supposed to become externally manifest. Like you can close your eyes and think that you're clapping your hands, or even with the eyes open, but nobody's actually clapping. And even though you have this notion, here, I'm clapping my hands, so what is that? So the idea, already going back a century, and Piaget tended to agree with that, is that reasoning is this interiorization of external sensory motor engagement in these situations, only that there's no external manifestation. So, which is like, if you see in a classroom, you see a child thinking about some arithmetic problem, you see them thinking, you don't know what's really going on. So that's part of the issue here, is why we're pushing to build artifacts that enable kids to make manifest externally the kind of work that they are doing internally. But again, you see, these words, external, internal, is completely blurred. But I told you this is going to be a long slide. I want to invite you to think a bit about this stuff called embodied coding. I mean, it goes back at least 2 centuries or more, and I want to give you some of my favorite empirical findings. So here's a crazy one. So Bala and Prophet. So you'd think that if perception and action are completely separate, then there's no way you can really affect the way a person sees something. They did something really cool. They took a bunch of people, and I should say just as a cover statement, all these articles that I'll be citing, they're all peer-reviewed, respectable articles that have been replicated for the most, and this is sort of from the canon of the field, from the cognitive sciences. So they took a bunch of people and showed them a mountain, just took them outside and said, how steep is this mountain? And they had all kind of ways that they could report visually and so on, and haptically and verbally. But the trick was, half the people just standing there looking at the mountain, trying to give it some kind of estimate. The other half, they put on their backs, like really heavy backpacks, up to a sixth or even a fifth of their weight. Just imagine each one of you what that would mean. That's pretty heavy stuff. So, and those people also had to make estimate of how steep the mountain was. So what do you think? Did they find a difference between those who were just standing looking at the mountain, how steep it is, those who were standing there and looking? Do you think there was a difference? Yeah, because otherwise I wouldn't even be talking about it. And now for the trick question. Trick question. Do you think that those with a heavier backpack said, oh, they thought it was a milder gradient than the other ones? Yeah, steeper. The people, they always in these kinds of studies, they always tell people, they use sort of pretext. They don't say, we're going to put something on your back so to see if you think it's steeper. They don't do that. They always find some kind of pretext. Oh, can you help us with this? There's always these confidants if you've ever been in these kind of things. So people don't know why they're being manipulated in the ways they are. It's very crap. But they tell them afterwards, right? But as a rule, and this has been replicated in all kinds of situations, those with the heavier packs on their back tend to believe that the mountain is steeper. So what is that? I mean, you'd think, again, if it were just a camera or some kind of computer sensor thing, it would just say, steep is steep is steep. What do you mean? But it turns out that our whole sensory motor engagement is taking place even as we make those decisions. And those of you who know the work of Antonio Damasio about how we make decisions through our body. People like to think, that's a book called Descartes' Error. People like to think that we're rational creatures, and he says, I don't know about that. I mean, I could just ask all of you now, where would you rather be right now? In a Manhattan subway or a beach in Copacabana? All right? Now, people used to think, I'm going through this production rules and rationalizations, A equals B, Copacabana. Right? But actually what probably happens, and I don't know if you want to introspect, you sort of envision that stuffy thing and then you think, beach, and you go, yeah, I want to be on the beach. So it means it's like a somatic decision. Or I could ask you what you prefer eating right now, like a huge bouillabaisse or maybe ice cream sorbet, right? How do you make this? It's through the body. And he argues it's not just about those kind of experiences, but it always goes through the somatic kinesthetic track. Okay, here's a cool one. So Hauk, Jan Stroud, and Pulvermuller, they let people read all kinds of words, and at the same time, they hooked them to brain imagery and just let people read words out, not knowing what this research study is about, as usual. And among the many words that were there, chandelier, carpet, whatever, like among this mass of distractors, we always throw in distractors so people don't know, there were also these kinds of verbs, lick, kick, and pick. And what they found was, whenever a person read the word lick, an area lit up in their brain, which is the same area of the muscularity of licking. And when they read kick, a different area region, which is related to kicking, like kicking a ball. And pick, something about the hands lit up there. So it's kind of inconclusive. You might say, it's just a byproduct. It's epiphenomenal to reading. But the research is going now towards the direction of saying, this will sound crazy, that the meaning of words is conveyed to our consciousness in nanoseconds, but it's conveyed to our consciousness through going through a sensory motor track. All right? We see, say, kick, and our body responds with this muscular, remember, it's only internal. You don't actually kick, right, while you're reading. Reacts with this truncated action, sensory motor system, And then that is what evokes in our minds the meaning of this word. Okay, so it goes through the body. Or how about this one? Okay, this is one of my favorite. So David Landy, student of Rob Goldstone at IU, Bloomington. All right, so why don't you take a look? I won't quiz anyone, but just take a look at how solve these. All right. Okay, I think that's enough time. Now, unless you do things in a very atypical way, you probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, you saw this, oh, let's move the x there. Yeah, I don't know, x equals 3. And here you said, it's the other one, move the x there, so x. Yeah, is that how people can? Yeah, that's how I do it, right? Now again, you'd think if there's somewhere where the buck stops, if there's some place where it's no longer all this embodied stuff this professor is speaking about, it's about math, you'd think, because it's abstract. But it turns out that it's not just, doesn't just seem to us that we're moving the x from side to side. We are literally doing it. Well, of course, we don't grab it, but in our mind's eye, in our mind's body, whatever you want to call it, in our embodied mind, we are literally moving it. And they had a brilliant setup where what they did was they showed stuff like this on the screen, but in the background, for those who remember days of TV where we had bad reception before computers, there was all this snow and fuzz in the background, like sometimes waves, like that icky stuff. So they said, oh, I'm sorry, something wrong with the technology, but let's go on. But what they did is they had these waves moving behind the symbols, all right? And the waves could move either this way or another condition. They could move that way. So they're controlled for that. But let's just go moving from right to left. So notice when the waves are moving from right to left, it's as if when you move the x, it's riding on the wave. All right? But when the waves are moving there and you want to move the x here, it's sort of going against the waves. And you think, so who cares about those waves? It's all abstract. So, turns out it took people longer to solve the problem where they were going against the wave as when they were moving in with it. All right? So all this kind of research makes you think like you have to think in new ways. Learning is moving in new ways. Or let's take, this is an amazing one. So this is Jasmine and Casasanto. All right. So why don't you take a look at these words? Right? These kind of the words that in terms of, okay, they have different meanings, but in terms of their emotional value, are they positive? Are they negative? I mean, they might be ambiguous, they might be neutral, just words. And yet, if I had to force you, if you had forced choice, each one of the words, you have to decide. It's either good or bad, all right? I mean, it's just, right? That's a study, so you have to do that. So say you did those things. I don't know what you feel right now and what you would do, but it turns out that people, again, study lots of people. On average, people put those words kind of more negative and those words more positive. And again, they might not even know why they did that, but it's over hundreds of words. Clicking, these kind of words are left. Anybody want to begin to guess why in the world? I mean, unless you know the study, this just blows my mind. All right? The reason that these words were more positive and these were more negative, these were like writing nymph, info, hulk, million, or crest, waterfare. Isn't that nuts? And this has been replicated, and in different languages as well. People's values, their implicit values for words, are moderated by their years of developing expertise and the skill of typing. It's kind of frightening, right? We're in the Matrix, right? So, how bizarre is that? Okay? Yeah.
Does it matter if they were left or right-handed?
Everybody always asks me that, and in fact, I would say that would make it even stronger, because otherwise you'd get an interaction. And I know that they looked into that in a study later.
Just to clarify,
Yeah.
but like they wrote good over here, and they wrote the word bad on the left side, and they wrote good.
So usually they click on two buttons, and they always cross the conditions so that they balance, count, and counterbalance. Okay? So that I recommend you look up this paper. If you cannot find it, write to me, and I'll send it to you. It's just nuts, this kind of stuff. Or how about this one? Okay, this one doesn't have a picture, but Alice Antle in Vancouver, Simon Fraser. So she kind of wondered, can you get to people's like politics through their body, like their political opinions, or at least their thoughts about social justice? So she had two groups of people manipulate some objects on a screen, and you could either manipulate it with your hand controls, or you can manipulate it with your whole body by standing on one of these kind of servo-mechanical kind of balance contraptions where you're moving objects. Turns out that people who had a more full body engagement in balancing and finding kind of equal grounds tended to be more oriented in supporting social justice causes. This one I'm not sure if it has been replicated, but all of this to say that learning is moving in new ways. And to get back to mathematics, you'd think, well, maybe it's people who are still learning. Maybe it's, they're not quite there. So this guy, I don't know, it's Terence Tao from UCLA, born in 1975. He'll be 40 this July. At the age of 24, he was full professor at UCLA, sorry, in mathematics. So he's like pretty up there, all right? And people asked him, tell me, how do you think when you think about your math? What is it that you do? So he says this, he's talking about partial differential equations. So he'll be calling them PDE. The content is not really important. He says, for evolutionary PDEs in particular, I find there is a rich zoo of colorful physical analogies that one can use to get a grip on a problem. I've used the metaphor of an egg yolk frying in a pool of oil, or a jet ski riding ocean waves, to understand the behavior of a fine-scaled or high-frequency component of a wave when under the influence of a lower-frequency field, and how it exchanges mass, energy, or momentum with its environment. And here's the deal. In one extreme case, I ended up rolling around on the floor with my eyes closed in order to understand the effect of a gauge transformation that was based on this type of interaction between different frequencies. Okay? It says, incidentally, that particular gauge transformation won me a Booker Prize once I understood how it worked. And he says, I guess this last example is one that I would have difficulty communicating to even my closest collaborators. Needless to say, none of these analogies show up in my published papers, although I did try to convey some of them in my PDE book eventually. So we're trying to bring these kinds of things into classrooms. Well, to summarize all this theory, people used to think that that's kind of how it works, all this processing, but it turns out it's much simpler. Cat looks at the ball, figures out what it affords, what it enables her. Those of you, the word affordance, that comes from the work of Gibson on ecological psychology, and then it just jumps, gets the ball. Okay, so here's where we come into the picture, and again, this goes back centuries. Friedrich Froebel, does anyone know this name? He's the guy who invented kindergarten. Okay? Kindergarten, a sort of garden for children. Before that, there was no such thing. And back then, he already created all these things he called gifts. This is gift number one, little yarn spheres. And then there were these sections. And, Montessori, Freudenthal, Gattegno-Dien, Papert, and others. So these are the kind of things that we build, and we try to understand how they work, what it means to learn with these objects. This is the first turtle from Seymour Papert, before it went only on a screen, for those who know logo. What we do in our lab is pedagogical design. We are constructing the means for the students to construct the meaning. Okay? But then, we believe that kids should experience first and analyze later. So we are building mathematical concepts from perception, action, aesthetics, and common sense. And whenever I write papers about this, I always start out very early on as saying, look, I'm not naive. I know how mathematics is done, and I know how much of it is going to be with symbolic notation, right? But I think that, let's call that step 2. What about step 1? What about building meaning? It's a powerful chapter came out a couple of years from Patrick Thompson at ASU. The chapter is called The Absence of Meaning, where he goes and interviews children and in classrooms, and the highest performers, they don't really understand what these things are. Or like my daughter, right? King Flip II, okay? So she feels she understands, but they don't really know what these things are. And we are looking to create opportunities for students by creating these sort of learning environments, or what we call fields of promoted action. We create these fields of promoted action where they learn to move in a new way, and only later we bring in bring in all the math, if you will, bring in all the symbols, I should say. So, but the question is, what should the experience be? And so in the remainder of my time, I want to zip through a project that we've been working on for a while. So anyone who's taught math in elementary school immediately knows that the big thing is fractions, right? The F word. Never thought about that. Right? So fractions, rational numbers, ratio and proportion, rate, and so on. And, well, we have the situation, 2 cups of blue, 3 cups of yellow, and we fill up, and get a certain green. Now, then we say, okay, how about if we have 4? And again, anyone who's taught, you know the kids will say, oh, 2 more of these, so you need 3 more of these. And I'm kind of trying to find a simple example here so you'll know what I'm getting at. But it's been called the additive frame of mind, because this is a multiplicative concept. And the question is, how can we move from the additive to the multiplicative? How can we help children not just say, okay, forget all this. So there are 2 things here. Both we want them to learn the multiplicative concepts, but moreover, we want for students to be able to understand how the multiplicative concept builds on the additive concepts. Okay? We want there to be some continuity. And so, yeah, of course, we know this. And so the question is, I don't know if you all can see it. So we're in search of an embodied design for proportional equivalence. What would it mean to start from some kind of motion in the world if we're trying for kids to first to learn to move in a new way and only later to signify it mathematically, only later to bring to bear the whole mathematical semiotic system in making sense of those sensory motor routines? What do we begin with? What corresponds to proportion? So our first thought was something like this. So this is Mark and Becky in the lab, and we thought, well, maybe we can get people to move in some kind of proportional way. So we built this mechanical thing. You know, Mark is cranking the thing there, and Becky's holding her hands, and there are pulleys of different size. So it's about 2 per 3 diameter, and so because of that, hands are going up at 2 per 3, and we were very happy with this for a while. But then we said, whoa, wait a moment. What is Becky even trying to do? She can just fall asleep, and it's like, what? There's no task here, and it's so difficult to change the proportion, and it's there's no way to challenge it. There's no way. There's something missing here, so we needed to go high tech. And about then, once we'd created this, what we call the mathematics imagery trainer for proportion, about then, Johnny Chung Lee, then at CMU, then after Microsoft. He hacked Wii Nintendo so that he could move objects with his fingers. He said, we'll do that too. So we created a situation where children are sitting against opposite a computer, and they're moving their hands. They have these sensors in the hand, and the rays are going to the sensor, to the tracker, which is behind there. That is going to the console, and that's going up, which is a very, very elaborate way of saying it's a video game. All right? So basically, I don't know if you can tell from here, but there are 2 little cursors here. There's a better slide in a moment. Basically, the kid is moving these 2 cursors. So this is a wait, nicer slide. This is a nicer slide of it, so you can see what's going on. But so what's the story? Kids, bring the kids into a lab, and they kind of know, oh, that's the project from Berkeley, but they don't know that it's math. And they come in. There's no numbers. There's no symbols. They're just these guys from the university, and they're seated at a desk, all right? So this will be my desk. It's important because I'll need this sort of as the datum line to speak about distances. So the desk is here, and opposite them there's the screen. Yeah, here it is. They're sitting at a desk, and opposite them is this screen. And we tell the kids, okay, and it could be maybe here are 2 sensors. It might even be with Kinect, if you know the Xbox Kinect, with bare hands. Just move your hands, make the screen. Let's start where it should be. They start out, the screen is red. We say, move your hands, make the screen green. And the kid's like, what? Make the screen? Anyway, they start like, and the screen is red, right? And they bring one hand up and down, it's still red. The other hand down, it's still red. Both hands up, down, fast. They have no idea what's going on. They start flailing their hands. At that point, they stop their hands, and it's green. All right? Now, why is it green? Because we had set this thing up in a particular, we could have set it up in a different way. It's not that there's something inherent that you do this, the world doesn't become green. We've set up this learning environment, this field of promoted action, where it measures the heights of your hands from the table. All right. Well, rather it measures the positions, calculates the distance. So maybe this hand is 10 inches up and that hand is 20 inches up. Okay. Now we've set up in the console to find the ratio. So 10 to 20 is like 1 per 2. And we set it up so that it's 1 per 2. I'm using just the generic example here. We had lots. We can change everything if we want, any ratio and so on. We've set it up so that if your hands are at 1 and 2, 1 per 2 heights over the desk, it will be green. Okay? Now remember, the kids have no idea this is math or what they're doing. All they find is that, and it's green. Then we say, make another green. Right? So it's green like that. And remember, this is like a continuous space. They have no idea. But they know, and they don't know that this is a height. It's just a position in the air. It's just a place. All they have is one hand referring to the other. And they have the knowledge, which is interesting, this kind of epistemic. They know that there's some, how did Shakespeare call it? There's a method in the madness. It's not like crazy stuff. The guys have got this, there's this thing we're interacting, we're figuring out something. So you know what they do? How will they make another green? Some switch, and right? And they bring up their hands like that. Now, why do they do that? Listen, this is something that I would do. I think most of you or everyone would do that. It's rational, it's consistent, it's logical. It's the way, it's our first default guess. If it's green here, something has to stay the same. In this manner, something has to be the same. All I know here to say is this little distance here, okay? And this comes back to that very complicated sentence I said at the very beginning. We start noticing some objects in the world that are guiding our action. We start noticing this distance, and we need to do something with this distance. We bring it up. Now, my claim, which I can't yet back up because you need longitudinal studies or some kind of a clever cross-sectional study we haven't yet done, is that this idea of keeping the distance the same both anticipates and explains those problems kids have later with numbers where they're trying to keep the differences the same between two situations. Because that's the only model they have. They don't have other ways of thinking. Okay, so kids bring their hands up and it goes red. All right? And what then happens is they say, wait a moment. They say, I messed up. And so they kind of fix that hand down, so it's green again. Then they bring the hands up again, it's red, they fix it. After a while, the kids say, wait a minute, I'm always fixing. Oh, I see. And then they say this convoluted sentence. It's kind of like I said to you before, they say, that it has to be the same, only it has to kind of change. It's like, and we love that. We love that because this is like, if you've read Piaget, this is like you can literally see how their operatory scheme, like the scheme is being differentiated and tugging towards something else. They're trying to assimilate the situation in terms of, by accommodating what they already know, but it becomes eventually something else. They go, oh yeah, the higher you go, the bigger it is. The bigger the distance needs to be. And these, we work with kids at ages grade 4, 5, and 6. The higher you go, the bigger the distance. And just then when they think they've figured it out, that is when we start. Remember I told you there's 2 steps. First you learn how to move, and then we bring in sort of the mathematical cavalry, right? So they start out by just moving these objects. And this is not to scale. This is just to explain here. At that moment we say to them, okay guys, we are going to bring in something, and let's see what it does for you. And we bring in this thing. It's a grid, right? At that point, 3 different reactions we see. Kids will either, and we call them enact, explain, and evaluate. Kids either will say, oh, yeah, that will help me do it better. I can, yeah, okay, there we go. Or they'll say, oh, now I can explain to you what I meant before. Or they say, oh, now I can check to see if what I did was right. So it's enact, explain, and evaluate. But in any case, they recognize in this symbolic artifact that we interpolated into their working space, into the problems, they recognize in it some kind of inherent utilities that will better enable them to do what they're already doing. Okay? So we call that point the hook. Okay? But in so doing, things start to shift. What do I mean by that? Because they start bringing up their hand, and the cursor arrives at a lateral line, and so they stop it there. Then they bring up the other hand, and so it's green. Then they say, oh, okay. Then they bring up this hand, and at one point, they say, for every 1 I pick up here, I need to pick up 2 over there. Okay? And it's fascinating because we never modeled it for them. Rather, we put some object in a frame of reference in their problem space. They recognize in this frame of reference certain inherent utilities that better enable them to do what they're anyway trying to do. But in so doing, they shifted into a mathematical way of thinking, A per B. And then we put in numbers that at some point kids say, all right, 1 and 2, 2 and 4, 3. Wait a moment, they say. It's always double. Okay? So we've written a lot about this phenomenon because we find it fascinating that it is enough to give children tools and they can sort of reconstruct mathematics. But again, it's not this radical reinvention, here are some things, I'm going to have coffee. Okay? We're sitting right there with them and doing certain things, and that interests us as well. Okay, I won't speak so much about the ratio table today, but we are looking at the strategies that children figure out for making green. So if initially they try keeping it, right, try to keep their hands the same, and that doesn't work, eventually they figure out, oh, the higher you go, the bigger it is. By the way, the diagonal lines up, because some kids were thinking it's to do with this diagonal, which is absolutely fine. They thought it was something like that. And then figure out, oh, once the grid comes in, A per B, A per B. And this transition here is fascinating because it's from a continuous space to a discrete space, from simultaneous action to sequential action, and from qualitative language, higher the bigger, to quantitative language. So this little moment here is something that I built my tenure on. And then when you bring in the numbers, they shift to another place which is predictive. This is iterative. If I say to a kid, okay, kid, if my hand is here, where should the other hand be? They need to say, wait a minute, this, that. It's iterative. This one is already kind of digital. If my hand is on 4, where should the other hand be? Oh, it's at 8. It has predictive power. So we literally see the, how's it called, ontogeny recapitulates phylogeny. We literally see in front of our eyes these evolutions. And so we're interested in the passages between the strategies, but we're also interested to see this additive to multiplicative thinking and whether things can be grounded back. And again, I cannot cover everything here. This is like 6 years been going on. But I do want to give you some kind of sense of what this looks like. So we're at a point, and this is, by the way, 2 kids working together. Now, what you'll see is they're at a point where they've just figured out that one kid's think, yeah, the higher, the bigger, the other kid is not quite sure if it's higher, bigger. Then we bring in the grid, and they say, okay, grid, and they start using it. And what you'll see is these are 2 children who are, each one, we were trying this out to see what happened in pairs. Each kid has one tracker, so we're letting the kids work with the track, and you'll see how they need to, because they're, I'm sure many of you have moved house, and you know this thing when you have a large table and you get it through a doorway and somebody helps you, and there's this kind of funny thing of, how do you coordinate, and especially when it's one of those things where you have to do that, the funny around the fridge and the thing. Like, working with another person, you just have to talk to them. And in so doing, you might be something new you've never done before. You have to articulate implicit understandings of the way the world works. You'll see how these children are starting to speak math, rudimentary math, but they do it as their discursive solution to the problem of co-enacting a production that they are yoked together into. All right? So you'll see that, and you'll see how they first hooked to this grid, and then they shift into a new way of speaking and thinking.
So I'm going to add something to the screen. Everything will stay the same, but something will be added to the screen. Tell me if you can see it.
Grid.
Yeah.
Oh, so we can like show where. See, so
Maybe it has to be 2 that entire box apart.
If I go here.
Then maybe you should raise it. So maybe the higher you go, the more boxes it is apart.
But to say like I'm here, then he has to be 1 box under me.
And then the higher he goes,
Here, he has to be like in the middle.
so
Then
the higher
here, he has to be like 2 boxes under me.
so like the higher it goes, the more space there has to be between each.
I think like when I go up to here, he has to be 1. Then when I go up,
Like for
another
every
one, then he has to go-
box he goes up, I have to
Go
go down.
You have to go up half.
Yeah.
So we call this hooks and shift. And again, I'm not a Luddist, but I'm also not a technocentricist. And my wonderful graduate student, Dragan Trninic, he's doing stuff here. Stuff is going on. The teacher is doing something. And we ask ourselves, so what is it that the teachers do that for fostering these hooks and shifts? And this is an opportunity for me to quickly say something. To quickly say something. If we are to take seriously, and I know my time is running out, right? 15. Thank you. If we are to take seriously the idea that mathematical concepts emerge from sensory-motor interaction with problems, then it means that we need to create these learning environments, these fields of promoted action that foster opportunities for students to develop these new ways of moving and then signify them in mathematical semiotic spaces and discourse and symbolic notations, but to have meaning that they work from. Then this has also implications for what teaching looks like. Because when you see kids move, you can literally see them think. You see what they're doing. You can see the errors and the sort of data they're collecting and the inferences and the patterns that they're noticing. But what I want to highlight here from all the various tables we've built of what it is that teachers do, tutors do, instructors do in these discovery-based environments, I want to highlight two that are just so typical and unique of opportunities for children to actually move. Right? So one of them I call co-enacting. And you'll see in this case, I was working with this kid, and she wasn't quite seeing things. And anyway, long story. So I took one of these controls.
I'll try doing that.
And I was sort of guiding her. And the moment she saw how it was working, suddenly she had this insight.
You're doing great.
So this kid who couldn't quite get it before, I moved one side. I was kind of doing like a controlled study. Okay, find the green for that. Here it is. Find the green for that. Here it is. Oh, find the green. Oh. So you might call that scaffolding, but it's a co-enactment of a practice. And it's not for no reason that recently my lab has been in increased collaboration with people from very diverse fields that you on first blush have nothing to do with mathematics. I'm working with martial artists, with musicians, and with dancers in order to understand how in those ancient pedagogical traditions, children are taught to move in new ways. So we sidestepping from mathematics and trying to understand these pedagogical traditions, and then sidestepping back to math and see how to make that happen. But here's another one, which is, can we see this here? Ooh, I really want you to see that other one. It's not coming up. Never mind, technology, right? So in the other one, you literally see me. It's called coaching. You see this same child. She's sitting here. I literally come from behind her and lift her arms. And the moment I lift the arms, she suddenly had the insight, oh, this is going double as fast, and that's because the distance is getting bigger, because for every one, this is... Suddenly, all at once, she has this moment of integrating the different concepts, the different strategies together. I mean, we once asked, I asked my graduate seminar, tell me, and these, graduate students, I said, why is it that, if for every one you go here, it's 2 here, 1 here, it's 2 here, 1 here, it's 2 here, why is that the same as wherever this hand is, this is double? Right? So they started, they had to use algebra. Well, this is going A and this is B, so this has gone A K times, so this is matched by going B K times, so KA and KB, cross out the K's, you back to AB. So I said, whoa, how about a 9-year-old? How would you explain that? But the 9-year-old did a better job, because they said, well, if for every one this is going up too, so let's think of this as my 1. So this is here, it's 2. Okay? From the mouths of babes. So we wrote that in one of our papers where we're looking at how they are coordinating these different visualizations. And just...
You're 15 minutes.
But does that include time for questions?
Yes, it does.
Oh, it includes time for questions.
So you have till 3:15 at 3 o'clock.
Thank you.
There you go.
Okay, so but I do want to leave for time for questions. So we built an iPad version of this, which is free download, tinyurl.com, free MITP. And we tried it out, some preliminary things, just to see how, what it looks like in a classroom.
And then we're going to go...
I'm gonna try making.
together?
Yeah, together.
Go back to 5. Yes. Go back to 5. All right, there. We're going to go up 4, up to 4, all right? 1, 2,
Now that you know this.
So once again, you see here, in the particular implementation where so happens you had 2 kids work together, you need not, you could. I mean, that's all open questions, what different kind of affordances. You see this work where they have to sort out, and you have this authentic peer-to-peer teaching, the one showing the other what it means and how these things need to work. And I was lucky because I gave a talk at the American Education Research Association, AERA, a few years ago, And then the next year, somebody came to me and said, I saw your talk, and I did my whole dissertation based on this. I worked with 150 students in 2 classrooms. I did a quasi-experimental study. And so these are like the 2 streams. One class does the usual curriculum. The other class worked with our material. Make the screen green and so on. And you see there's a kid up at the front of the class working, and other kids are sort of cheering and explaining. So you have some vicarious learning going on. And then they took the video from that screen, and then they brought it to another classroom, just for the comparison. So the other classroom, they saw how these people had moved, or they didn't quite understand what it is. That's just for the methodology. They found that the kids working with my system had larger conceptual gains when they were tested later on items from the standard literature. So at that point, we were pretty happy, and we thought, well, maybe we can get some federal funding to continue this. And it was kind of 2012, so we didn't know who would be there. And so we were trying to teach people how to move, and wherever he is upstairs. But we didn't know. We thought maybe it will be this guy. We didn't know if who'll be there. But we did get money, and eventually what we did is we took the original thing you saw before, and now we are creating a virtual pedagogical agent. So the kid stands in front of this giant touch screen and learning to move. On the other hand, sort of through the looking glass, like there's this avatar who moves with them. If anyone does here martial arts, you might know what push hands is. It's kind of that. They're working together, and so we're creating that. And through this work, with my lovely student Virginia Flood, doing an amazing job. So we have collaborators at UC Davis, University of California, Davis, and they are building for us. They use Pixar stuff in order, once we give them all the information about how to move their hands and we give them all these GIFs, so this is Virginia wearing a motion capture and moving like a teacher, and then creating an avatar who moves that way. So we're going to start field testing that in a few months. And I guess at this point, I will just show you one more slide. And that is to say that we are also using this is a group of Dutch collaborators who are developing further my work and doing eye tracking. Now, eye tracking is this amazing stuff where as the kid moves, this is a kid, and this is the tablet they're working on, like an iPad. But as they're moving these bars up and down, we know where they are looking. This tells us where the child is looking in real time. Okay? So this is in Dutch, but I will translate. So you'll see a child moving the hands here, trying to make it green, and you can see where they're looking. And at some point, the researcher will say...
Kun je nu iets zeggen over de vorm van de blokken?
She says, can you say something about the shape of the bars now? When do the bars turn green?
Als ze tegelijk gaan?
When they move at the same time?
Nee.
No. Okay. Now, I want you to notice now... look at that. Where's the eye? Halfway up. Yeah. Stuff is beginning to happen here. But the kid doesn't yet know. Okay, but the kid doesn't yet say it. But we know what they're thinking, what they're trying. And so now she says, can you think of something? What happens now? And it says, now it turns all red again. And this one...
Deze is die kleinste is de helft.
The kleinste, and this one, the little one, is half as big as the bigger one.
Is ook zo?
Okay, is that the same when you do it low on the screen? If you think so, can you show me? It says, yes, this one goes to the half of this one. De kleinste is de helft van die grootste. Summary. There's a new paradigm in educational research and practice, embodiment and embodiment design. There are many open questions. What is the nature of an embodied concept? How are concepts different from actions? We're beginning to answer these, beginning to publish on them. Still lots of questions remain open. If concepts are embodied, we think perhaps a good place to begin is to understand action learning, which is why my closest collaborator right now is a professor from Madrid, from the European University, Professor Raúl Sánchez García, who's a sociologist of sport. These are the people we are working with these days. And already we've been publishing about these ideas. This is all online. It's all available. And these are 2 books that have come out that I have chapters in. I get nothing if you buy this. I think I have to pay if you buy it. But I just wanted you to know, this particular one, edited by a young colleague of mine, Victor Lee, from Utah University, Learning Technologies and the Body, Integration and Implementation in Formal and Informal Learning Environments. It's only just come out. I don't even know if they have the copies yet, so I don't know if they brought it downstairs. And with this, 10 minutes for questions, so thank you very much.
If you have a question, go to the microphone, please.
Sure. This one? Yep. I've also been asked to put this up online. I could do that. Still, there's some kind of animation things that move, so but just write to me if you don't get stuff you need. Oh, please go ahead. Sorry. Are you moderating? Mm-hmm.
100 years of technology.
It's fascinating that you bring up Montessori. First of all, an interesting thing is there's this general phenomenon that Montessori, she created her work for children in the outskirts of, I think, Rome or Naples, where they didn't have many resources. And yet, 100 years later, or what have you, it's the most expensive school to get into, right? So, and I think it's not for no reason. I think work that is done for people from backgrounds who have greater challenges to get into academia, into college, etc. The work that is done for children with cognitive deficits, work that is done for children with visual and other impairments, ultimately that is the best work that's being done because they care for these kids to build meaning. Okay? Now, Montessori has various, there are varieties. And I know when we were checking schools for our kids, we were stunned by how regimented they were. This is the way you have to work. But there are other varieties of Montessori. I know when Montessori was brought in by Jean Bamberger to Boston in the 70s, they were looking for other kinds of ways of doing it. So I would say, in my interactions with Montessori, they are very, they hope I'm not offending anyone, they tend to be a bit cultish, as this is the way that things are done, and they don't let children explore. And I think the reason is also to do with where this originally came from, with children who need more authority in their lives. As things change, even cults have to open their eyes to change. And somebody wrote to me, and I wrote back from Montessori, but I don't think they liked what I wrote back. So I'm trying to have some kind of interaction with them, but I'd be glad if you can facilitate more. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Can you talk a little about how you apply that to this mathematical?
Yes. Thank you for that question, sir. So, gentleman is alluding to a comment I made earlier where I was quoting, I think it's Haeckel, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, from the late 19th century, who said, if you look at how a child develops, there's interesting mappings of that onto how humanity evolved. Right? Now, there's these various pedagogical orientations which are called discovery-based. Right? We want children to, for instance, Hans Freudenthal from Realistic Mathematics Education and the Dutch school, he said we want children to be engaged in what he called guided reinvention of mathematics. It's really important to, the word guided is just not, it's not emphasized enough. It is not the case, that we leave kids in the room and we say, okay, I'm going to have coffee, you go and reinvent math. Oh, Johnny, you haven't reinvented calculus yet. What's wrong with you, right? There's something that we are doing there. We cannot afford to just leave kids there and it's absurd to expect that they will reinvent mathematics. So that is why we are so fascinated by this interaction between the student and the teacher. I always have in mind, I know this sounds very conceited, you'll soon hear why, but it's that fragment from the Michelangelo picture in the Sistine Chapel. It's like sort of God and then sort of Adam. And forget the God, but there's just the thing with the fingers here, that they're so close together. And I always think about this, it's like the child and the teacher, or the, if you will, it's kind of natives and the missionaries, or if you think it's these people craving to learn and to be more effective in the world, and people who already have all these artifacts, but you cannot throw things on people. Teaching is not just telling people because, right, King Philip II. There's no understanding rather, and it's kind of absurd, right? We're trying to get the kids to come to the same understanding. So we are creating learning environments in which we foster opportunity for children to engage in problems so that they can reinvent the mathematics. But these are very, very well-designed, well-crafted, well-thoughted fields of promoted action such as Montessori did, so that they will come to these insights. But it is guided. There are certain things there's certain moments that we put in very particular things and say very particular words to make it happen. And it's an art, and it's the art of teaching. Okay? Yeah, I know there was one more question. I think, are you moderating me?
Yeah, can you go to the microphone or color mixing? I'm wondering about that as
That's,
well.
yeah, so thank you very much. So the question here is, all right, if we're going to go whole hog in this kind of situated learning and start from that, from the manipulative, why the virtual? So first of all, I don't mind. There are all kind of ways of engaging. The issue with colors is, this is really interesting. You know, when teachers teach ratio and proportion, they always evoke these things like recipes, right, 2 of this, 3 and that, you know, to make your caipirinha, to make, age inappropriate, or to whatever, to make paint 2 of this and 3 of that. But the moment you pour them in, that's it. You have a color. You cannot re-extract. Second thing is, if you make another set and you're comparing, you cannot measure with high acuity if it's the same. And third of all, you cannot just have all these resources and using them in ways that... So you can give certain qualitative sense, and that is great, but there are other affordances to technology. And whenever I really welcome this, whenever I present this kind of work, there's always people with wonderful ideas. I was presenting at Stanford last week, and one said, I know, instead of 2 hands, put them on a rowing machine, okay, like Xbox Kinect, and this is like the 2, and this is the 3, and if they deviate, then they'll get off path, so they have to keep all the time orienting 2 against 3, which I thought is, as a musician, I thought it was interesting to get 2 against 3 or 3 against 4. So people have lots of ideas, and this is also part of a bigger conversation in design. What do we start with? Do we start from real world out there and try to model the world as it is, as we have found it? Or do we start with some kind of digested version of the world where we put you in a very schematic, more kind of a model of a situation? Or do we start from things which are even more generic? There are no answers to that, and actually some of my students are working on these issues. What do you start from? From situations in the world, from models, or from very generic objects? And we have found that actually starting from something very generic then enables you to say all kinds of things, because you can, if you learn to move in a new way, then you can say, okay, for every two of the green, I put 3 of the blue. No, 2 of the yellow, I put, not good, my wife is the designer, for graphic designer. So 2 or 3, but then I can say there are 2 flowers here, a petunia and a tulip, and they're growing at 2 and 3 inches a week. So suddenly, this, what my student Dragan Treninic, he calls this an enactive artifact. It's a choreography. It's like anything that is motion, is coordinated, but has no effect on the world. This choreography, this enactive artifact, can be imbued with multiple different meanings, which are all applications or cases of that. So. Was that a sign to stop? So the debate is still on, and there are multiple types of designs that are out there.
Thank you.
Thank you.